Look at Medellin. No, really look at it. The gleaming metro system, the cable cars climbing into the hillside favelas, the modern high-rises, the tech startups, the digital nomads sipping coffee in Poblado. Every travel blog tells the same story. Medellin transformed. From murder capital of the world to innovation hub. From Pablo Escobar's stronghold to South America's most livable city. A miracle of urban renewal. It's a beautiful story. It's also incomplete. Because here's a question nobody asks in polite company. Where did the money come from? Not the government grants, not the foreign investment, not the legitimate economy that everyone celebrates. Where did the original capital come from? The money that built the first buildings, that attracted the first investors, that created the first jobs? The answer is hiding in plain sight. It's in the concrete, in the rebar, in the foundations of half the buildings in northern Colombia. Drug money didn't just fund violence, it funded an economy. A massive, parallel, invisible economy that nobody measures, nobody taxes, and nobody talks about except in whispers. This is the story of the hidden GDP, the shadow economy that built modern Colombia, and the uncomfortable truth about where prosperity actually comes from in Latin America. 1. The number nobody knows. Let's start with what we don't know. Nobody can tell you exactly how much drug money flows through Colombia's economy. Not the government, not the DEA, not the economists. The nature of illegal activity is that it doesn't file tax returns. But we have estimates, and the estimates are staggering. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimates that Colombian cocaine generates between $10 and $15 billion in export revenue annually. Some estimates run higher, up to $25 billion when you include all stages of the supply chain. For context, Colombia's total legal exports are around $60 billion. Coffee, the product Colombia is famous for, generates about $3 billion. Cocaine generates 3 to 5 times more than coffee. But here's the thing about drug money. It doesn't stay in briefcases. It can't. You can't spend $15 billion in cash. You can't invest it, grow it, or pass it to your children without moving it into the legitimate economy. That process is called money laundering, and Colombia has elevated it to an art form. 2. The concrete economy. The easiest way to launder money is construction. Think about it. You're a drug trafficker with $10 million in cash. You can't deposit it in a bank, you can't buy stocks, you can't do anything that creates a paper trail. But you can build an apartment building. You create a shell company. You buy land with cash, which is legal in many contexts. You hire construction workers, paid partly in cash. You buy materials from suppliers who are happy to take cash. You build. When the building is complete, you have a legitimate asset. You can sell the apartments, you can rent them, you can take out mortgages against the property. The dirty money has become clean real estate. This isn't theoretical, this is the story of Colombian cities over the past 40 years. During the height of the Medellin and Cali cartels in the 1980 seconds and 1990 seconds, Colombia experienced a construction boom that defied economic logic. Buildings went up in neighborhoods where nobody should have been building. Luxury apartments appeared in cities with no apparent market for them. The money had to go somewhere. It went into concrete. Today, estimates suggest that anywhere from 20% to 40% of construction in certain Colombian regions has some connection to illicit money, not necessarily cartel money directly. The laundering ecosystem has diversified, but the pattern remains. When you walk through Medellin or Cartagena or Barranquilla, you're walking through buildings that exist because drug profits needed to become something else. 3. The cascading effect. Here's where it gets complicated. Because laundered money doesn't just build buildings, it creates ripple effects through the entire economy. That construction project, it employed workers. Those workers spent their wages at local businesses. Those businesses hired more employees. Those employees bought things. The economist's term is multiplier effect. Every dollar that enters an economy gets spent multiple times. Drug money has a multiplier just like any other money. A study by Colombian economists attempted to model this. Their conclusion: for every dollar of drug money that enters the Colombian economy, approximately $2.50 in economic activity is generated through these cascading effects. If $10 billion in drug money enters Colombia annually, the total economic impact could be $25 billion or more. That's not a rounding error. That's a significant percentage of Colombia's GDP. This creates an uncomfortable reality. The Colombian economy, as it exists today, has been shaped by drug money at every level. The restaurants that serve construction workers, the car dealerships that sell to nouveau riche narcos, the banks that, knowingly or unknowingly, process laundered funds, the real estate agents, lawyers, accountants, and notaries who facilitate transactions. An entire professional class exists to move illegal money into legal channels. They don't think of themselves as criminals. They're just doing their jobs, but their jobs depend on the drug trade. 4. The import-export machine. Construction is the most visible laundering channel. It's not the only one. The Colombian customs system has been weaponized for money laundering through something called trade-based laundering. Here's how it works. A Colombian importer wants to bring $1 million in drug money back from the United States. They find an American exporter willing to play along. The Colombian orders, say, $100,000 worth of electronics. The American exporter invoices them for $1 million. The Colombian pays the invoice through the banking system, perfectly legal. The American keeps $100,000 for the actual goods plus a fee for the service. They send the remaining $800,000 back to the Colombian through a separate channel, perhaps as an investment or loan. The Colombian now has $800,000 in their local bank account that came from a legitimate-looking import transaction. The money is clean. This happens constantly. Studies of Colombian import data have found systematic over-invoicing in certain product categories: electronics, textiles, machinery. The gap between what's invoiced and what's actually shipped represents laundered funds. Some estimates suggest that 10% to 15% of Colombian imports are inflated for laundering purposes. That's billions of dollars annually flowing through what looks like normal trade. 5. The peso black market. Perhaps the most elegant laundering system is also the simplest: the black market peso exchange. Colombian traffickers accumulate dollars in the United States. American businesses need to buy Colombian goods, especially emeralds, coffee, and manufactured products. The legitimate exchange rate involves banks, fees, and paperwork. The black market offers a better deal. The trafficker sells their dirty dollars at a discount to a peso broker. The peso broker sells those dollars to Colombian businesses who need to pay for American imports. The businesses get a better exchange rate than they'd get at a bank. The broker takes a cut. The trafficker gets clean pesos deposited in Colombia. Everyone wins except the government that loses visibility and taxes. This system moves an estimated $5 to $10 billion annually. It's so embedded in Colombian commerce that many legitimate businesses use it without fully understanding they're participating in money laundering. The businessman buying machine parts from Ohio, the coffee exporter receiving payment for a shipment, the emerald dealer converting sales revenue. They're all potentially touching drug money that's been recycled through the peso exchange. 6. The employment question. Here's the question that makes everyone uncomfortable. How many jobs depend on drug money? Not jobs in trafficking itself. Jobs in the legitimate economy that exists because drug money flows through it. The construction worker building a narco-funded apartment building has a legitimate job. The restaurant owner serving lunch to that construction crew has a legitimate business. The teacher at the private school, paid for by the restaurant owner's taxes, has a legitimate salary. Where does the taint end? If we accept that drug money represents a significant injection into the Colombian economy, and if we accept that this money creates jobs through multiplier effects, then we have to accept that some meaningful percentage of Colombian employment depends, directly or indirectly, on the drug trade. Some economists have tried to estimate this. The numbers are necessarily imprecise, but credible estimates suggest that 15% to 20% of employment in certain Colombian regions may be connected to drug economy spending. In departments like Antioquia, Cordoba, or Valle del Cauca, the percentage may be higher. This isn't a moral judgment. Construction workers need to eat. They take jobs that exist, but the implication is stark. If the drug money disappeared tomorrow, Colombia would face an employment crisis. 7. The spread across Latin America. Colombia isn't unique, it's just the most documented case. Drug money flows through every Latin American economy to varying degrees. Mexico. The cartels generate an estimated $25 to $50 billion annually. That money enters the Mexican economy through construction, retail, agriculture, and thousands of businesses. Some economists estimate that 3% to 4% of Mexican GDP is directly connected to cartel money. Peru. As a major cocaine producer, Peru sees billions in drug money filtered through its economy. Lima's construction boom of the past 2 decades has persistent rumors of narco-financing. Brazil. As a major transit and consumption country, Brazil's financial system processes enormous volumes of drug money. The sophisticated banking sector makes laundering easier, not harder. Panama. The entire economy is essentially a laundering hub. The country's GDP per capita is mysteriously high for its level of development. The Panamanian financial system processes money from across the hemisphere, much of it questionable. Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador, Honduras, Guatemala, every country in the region has some drug money flowing through its economy. The percentages vary, the mechanisms differ, but the pattern is universal. Latin America isn't just affected by the drug trade. Latin America's economies have been partially constructed by the drug trade. 8. The legitimacy problem. Time does something strange to dirty money. It cleans it. That apartment building built with cartel money in 1990, it's been sold 3 times since then. The current owner bought it legitimately, with a mortgage from a legitimate bank. The building is now legitimate. The family that got rich in the 1980 seconds through questionable means, their grandchildren went to the best universities, married into respectable families, and run legitimate businesses. The origin of the wealth has been forgotten. This is the long game of money laundering. If you can survive long enough, everything becomes respectable. Colombian society is filled with families whose wealth, if you trace it back far enough, has uncomfortable origins. The same is true in Mexico, in Peru, in every country with a significant drug history. At what point does dirty money become clean? After 1 generation? 2? When the original criminal dies? There's no good answer. But the practical reality is that drug money becomes embedded in the social fabric. The universities funded by donations from dubious sources. The hospitals built with laundered construction money. The political campaigns financed by people who needed favors. The drug economy doesn't exist in a separate universe. It exists in this one, intertwined with everything else. 9. The numbers they don't publish. Official GDP statistics in Latin America are, to put it politely, incomplete. The United Nations estimates that the illegal drug trade represents approximately 1% of global GDP, around $650 billion annually. In drug-producing and transit countries, the percentage is much higher. But these numbers don't appear in official statistics. Colombia's reported GDP doesn't include cocaine exports. Mexico's employment figures don't count cartel payrolls. Panama's financial services sector doesn't acknowledge its laundering component. This creates a strange situation. The official economy and the real economy are different things. When economists analyze Latin American growth, they're analyzing the visible economy. The invisible economy, potentially 5% to 15% of actual economic activity depending on the country, simply doesn't exist in the data. This might explain some puzzles. Why do certain Colombian cities have construction booms despite no apparent demand? The demand is invisible, it's laundering demand. Why do Mexican border towns have more retail square footage than their populations justify? Because the retail is a washing machine for cartel cash. Why does Panama have a higher GDP per capita than its productivity would suggest? Because productivity isn't the only source of income. The hidden GDP explains economic phenomena that the official economy cannot. 10. What happens if it stops? Here's the thought experiment that nobody wants to conduct. What if the drug money actually stopped? Imagine tomorrow, magically, the cocaine trade ends. No production, no trafficking, no billions flowing through Latin American economies. In the short term, economic crisis. Construction industries would collapse as their main source of capital disappeared. Banks would face liquidity problems as deposits evaporated. Retail would contract. Employment would spike. The economies have become dependent on the drug money, even though they don't acknowledge it. In the medium term, adjustment. Economies would resize to their legitimate productive capacity. This would be painful. Countries would be poorer than they think they are. In the long term, potentially healthier economies, resources currently devoted to laundering and its associated corruption could be redirected. Investment could flow to productive sectors rather than real estate speculation. The legal economy could grow without the distortions created by illegal money. But the transition would be brutal, and no country is prepared for it, because no country officially admits the dependency exists. 11. The moral maze. This is where analysis runs into ethics. Drug money has built schools. The narco who donated to the local hospital saved lives. The laundered construction money employed workers who fed families. Does the good that money did cancel out the violence it required? Does the construction worker bear any responsibility for where his employer's capital came from? Does the country that benefits have an obligation to refuse the benefit? There are no clean answers. What we can say is that the choice isn't between drug money and no money. It's between drug money and the legitimate economy that would exist without it. That legitimate economy would be smaller. But it wouldn't require cocaine production, trafficking violence, and addiction epidemics. The current system externalizes costs. The violence happens somewhere else. The addiction happens somewhere else. The benefits concentrate in the laundering economy while the costs spread across the consuming countries and the producing communities. Latin America captures a fraction of drug trade profits while absorbing enormous costs. The real money flows to international networks. The region is left with violence, corruption, and an economic dependency that nobody wants to admit. Conclusion: the economy we don't discuss. The hidden GDP is real. It built cities. It employed millions. It shaped the economies that exist today across Latin America. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's basic economics applied to illegal activity. Money flows, money multiplies, money builds things. The fact that the money started as cocaine revenue doesn't change these dynamics. When you look at the modern skylines of Medellin, Mexico City, or Lima, you're looking at economies that were partially constructed with drug capital. The buildings are real, the jobs were real, the economic growth was real. It was also built on violence, addiction, and human misery. The construction workers' legitimate paycheck came, ultimately, from someone's destroyed life in New York or London or Sao Paulo. This is the moral complexity that nobody wants to confront. The drug economy isn't separate from the legitimate economy. It's woven into it. Extracting it would require dismantling significant portions of what exists. So instead, we don't talk about it. The hidden GDP remains hidden. The money keeps flowing, the cities keep building, and everyone pretends the foundation isn't what it is. Colombia didn't transform despite the drug trade. Colombia transformed partially because of it. The miracle of Medellin includes chapters that don't make it into the travel blogs. That's not a celebration of drug money. It's an acknowledgement of reality. And until we acknowledge reality, we can't begin to address it. If this analysis made you see the economics of drugs differently, hit that subscribe button, because the systems that shape our world are often the ones we're not supposed to discuss. See you in the comments, and remember, economics doesn't judge where money comes from. It just follows where it goes.